So predictably, Republicans, right-wing media, extremists on the right, authoritarians, the usual suspects, are furious about the student loan debt forgiveness that Joe Biden is doing. Now, this is another great accomplishment for Joe Biden. And in the next story, I'm actually going to go through the incredible 2-month 180, arguably one of the greatest turnarounds in a presidency, certainly that I've covered, and I would argue in decades in the United States. But before we get to that, one of the real reasons that Republicans are melting down and panicking over Joe Biden's student loan debt forgiveness that was announced yesterday is that on some level they realize 43 million people directly benefit, and then their families, their spouses, their parents who might be helping with the payment, whoever, the children, everybody benefits indirectly as well. And Republicans realize that this could be really bad for them in the November midterms, but they have nothing else to do than to make outrageous claims about why this is bad. Well, this is unfair to people who have paid their student loans. We talked about that in the last segment. This is a handout. This teaches people they don't have to be financially responsible or whatever else the case may be. And part of what's happening is they know this is very bad for them. Let's look at a couple of examples of this. Here's Fox News propagandist Tucker Carlson, whose lawyers have argued in court that he's not really doing news, he's doing entertainment, and nothing he says should really be taken seriously. That's a legal defense to Tucker Carlson's program. Tucker Carlson says that the student debt relief is a form of reparations being paid to drug-addicted robots who have no job prospects. Wow.
So when Joe Biden announced today that he plans to cancel some of that debt, the obvious response would be to celebrate the announcement. But we didn't right away. Instead, we paused to learn the details about what he was proposing. That's a habit we've picked up from watching people like Joe Biden in action over the past several years. It's always worth reading the fine print. These are the very same people, after all, who decided it was a good idea somehow to defund the police. They're the ones.
Okay, now remember, they haven't defunded the police. And as far as Joe Biden's concerned, he has nothing to do with police funding. I mean, it's just neither here nor there. It's a complete non sequitur.
You forced the entire American population to take an experimental COVID vaccine, even when it became obvious that it didn't work. These are the people who sent.
Okay, and again, there's so much to that. The initial vaccine against the initial variant was extremely effective at preventing infection. Over time, its ability to prevent infection diminished, but its ability to prevent serious COVID, death, and hospitalization was still good. I mean, all of these one-line lies require some time to unpack, but really this is about the student loan debt forgiveness.
Crack pipes to crack addicts, the ones who think 16-year-olds should vote in presidential elections, the ones who screamed at you about how Ukraine's borders are sacrosanct, but yours are racist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are people, in other words, with a long and public track record of very bad ideas, extraordinarily bad ideas. Ideas so stupid you couldn't make them up. So the question is this idea different? We want it to be, but unfortunately it's not. And here's how you know it's not. Colleges aren't refunding any of the loan money. You are. You are. But wait, you say, I didn't defraud anyone. I didn't claim that a degree in post-colonial liberation studies from Wesleyan would be worth anything. I didn't take 80 grand a year from middle-class families in order to turn their children into Xanax-addicted robots with no job prospects. Well,
listen, these are just Xanax-addicted robots with no job prospects. They don't deserve the student loan forgiveness. Now, there's so many different ways to respond to this. And as we've talked about earlier, it's good for the economy for money to be going back into real businesses rather than just interest on student loans paid to mega financial corporations, which people like Tucker Carlson often criticize. But there's a bigger picture here, which is Tucker correctly points out we have a broken higher education system. The other day, I was calculating, what was it? I was calculating based on how much my girlfriend's alma mater's tuition went up from when she graduated to now. We were calculating that when our daughter would be 18, it would be $203,000 a year if just it kept growing at the same rate. Like, obviously something has to break. It's a completely broken system. Tucker's correctly identifying that. And you know what? I have even said before, there should be some consideration based on your major, whether the cost of the education is worthwhile, right? I mean, when I think about any expense, I think about what's the value. And if you're going into a field where you are unlikely to really make money, then it's perfectly fair to consider whether the cost of the education makes sense. There's a whole bunch of things that go into that. But again, this idea of the recipients aren't deserving is just it's the same way they talk about any welfare program. And it's a very broken and disturbing way to talk about it. Now, a couple other examples of this. Here is Dan Bongino talking to Jesse Waters on Fox News. He says that the student loan debt forgiveness is evidence of the collapse of America.
Still trying to get over this whole thing because, listen, Jesse, if you were doing a tutorial on what the collapse of great empires look like, just pick up your phone, start the video camera, because this is exactly what it looks like, and just leave it running. This is the movie. This is the autobiography of the American empire collapsing before our very eyes.
Yep. $10K of student loan forgiveness for those making under $125,000 and $20K for Pell Grant recipients. That's the end of American civilization. Now, of course, the counterpoints are just about every country in Western and Northern Europe, where they are flourishing, they are good business environments, people have healthcare, the healthcare is good, education is good, quality of life is good, life expectancy is good, and in many cases, they have college education paid through taxation. Now, here, government money for the forgiveness means it's taxpayer money. That's absolutely true. And it's really no different than the taxpayer money directly paying for the education. In this case, it didn't directly pay for it. Now it's going to be part of the forgiveness. It's not the indication of a collapsing empire. Many of the best countries in the world to live in have education paid for through taxation. Now, one more Bongino clip. Here he is. It's more kind of like lazy, like these people, everybody's lazy, according to Bongino.
What's happening here really has me a little annoyed because there's this thing, an income repayment program. You know what it's called? It's called a freaking job. And here's how this works, a job. There's this thing. Let me just do a demo for you all at home. Yeah. Okay. There's this thing you have. It's called the ass right here. The ass, okay? And when the ass gets up out of the seat and goes to work, and you remove the ass from the seat, you get this thing. It's a 4-letter word called a job. Some of you know Joe Biden will get the joke. You get the job, and then you pay back the loan.
Okay. So, first of all, right-wingers think that that's like a thinker. They believe Bongino's a thinker. Now, aside from the lazy narrative just being, it's a lazy narrative, quite frankly. It's lazy to just do the lazy narrative. A lot of the people, I don't know how old he is, but a lot of the people who say, just work and pay for school, that's all. When they were in school, relative to income, college was exponentially cheaper. It was orders of magnitude cheaper. The relationship, in fact, Tom Hartman has talked about on his program how his wife, Louise, if I recall correctly, basically waitressed to pay for college. The idea now that you could work like in food service to pay for college is absurd because the relationship between the cost of college and the minimum wage and the median wage has gotten completely out of whack. So these people don't know what they're talking about, but they're certainly trying to make you think that they do.